I'm delighted to be talking to Lynne Copley from the Put It Like This website. And this is a website which helps English learners find their own voices in English. Lynne is going to talk to us about how you can improve your listening in advanced exams. And she's going to talk about this also at the Advanced English Summit. Welcome, Lynne. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to participate in the summit. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much, Lynne, for agreeing to take part. So your talk then is on how you can improve the listening part of advanced exams. So perhaps you can talk to us about some of the problems that people have in advanced English exams.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know you're a teacher too, so you have students who've done advanced exams. And a lot of students come to me and they say, I prepared for the other parts of the exam. I did lots of writings, I did lots of readings, but the listening really freaks me out. They say the experience of listening for so long, they find it really stressful. They found it tiring often. Some people even say, like they felt so sleepy and they couldn't concentrate and they felt their minds wandering off. And then other people say it was just so stressful because I could only hear the listening once. Of course, in the IELTS exam, you only hear the listening once. In the Cambridge suite of exams, CAI, proficiency, B2, C1, C2, you get to hear the listenings twice. And I know that there are other exams out there. Twice is usually the common amount of times that you listen. But even when they get to listen twice, they say it was so stressful, and the pressure. I was listening and there's this big room of people and I was distracted and my eyes were wandering, and they find it very, very high pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and in fact, some of my students said that they couldn't actually hear it very well. So,
Yeah.
If the equipment isn't brilliant, then it's going to be tough. So, how can you then get over that stress? How can you reduce the stress of a listening exam?
Well, it's not rocket science. I think it's like everything in life, really. In order for the stress part, I think there are some other things that I'll be looking at in my talk, which you definitely can do to prepare for the listening. But the very basic beginning of it all is that you have to be prepared. I think people think that the listening skill is something. They don't pay very much attention to it when they're studying English. They are focused on vocabulary, they're focused on grammar, they're focused on reading, they have to learn how to write. And they almost think that listening is an instinctive thing, that it's a sort of something that they will just do, like riding a bike. And of course, to some extent, that's true. When you learn your native language, that is what happens. But when you're learning a foreign language, you're learning a language in a very reduced period of time comparatively. A native speaker takes about 15 years to be able to speak with some degree of proficiency. And, language learners, they're wanting to learn English in 2 years, 4 years. Yeah. So you can't leave the listening part of your preparation to chance because it will take you much longer. Yeah. And I don't know about you, Claire. I've lived abroad. You've lived abroad. And I've lived abroad for 25 years in Spain, and I still have difficulty listening to the news. If they're speaking very quickly or if they're watching a movie. It's not an easy skill, but there are things that we can do to prepare ourselves for it. And that's what I'll be looking at in the talk a lot, of course. But the main thing, I think, coming back, that was a long-winded, coming back to it, I think the main element is you need to be prepared for your exam. A lot of people don't prepare. They have no idea what kind of question types are coming. They have never practiced listening with a recording echoing around a room because they've been practicing at home with their headsets or with their earphones. And unless you do a computer-based exam, in Cambridge, that's not the situation that you're going to have. You're going to be in a big room with loudspeakers, with where you can't control the volume yourself. You can't control the echoing. So, of course, that's something that you can also practice beforehand. But some people are sort of blinded. They're focusing on other things and they forget that. And that causes a lot of stress in the exam room, of course.
Yeah, I think these are all really good points, especially the fact that you can't control your listening environments. And of course, that's designed to mimic our own listening environments. You know, if you're at a train station and you hear an announcement, you can't control the volume or the echo there either. But
No,
I take your
true.
point, you know, that you really do have to prepare and maybe do a kind of a mock exam so that you at least are prepared for the exam itself. You mentioned that, you know, living in Spain, you don't always understand things either. And I found the same because I lived for quite a long time in Italy. And one of the big problems in Italy, and I imagine it's also the same, in fact, I'm sure it's the same for learners of English, is that the accents can be so difficult. So when I lived in Rome, my ear was attuned to understanding how Romans speak Italian. Then when I lived somewhere else, again, my ear was attuned to that. But if I suddenly heard someone speaking from, say, the north or from Sicily, I'd be like, what? I don't really understand that person. And I imagine that's another problem that learners have.
Of course. And of course, you have to see in English, it is much worse than in Italy or France or Spain, because you have to think about where is English spoken in the world. English is spoken in Australia, in New Zealand, in America. And then when you come to the UK, we have a huge variety of accents: Scottish, Welsh, Northeast, Geordie. I'm from the northeast of England, the south of England. There is a myriad. There's a lot of Indian people. English is the first language, one of the official languages in England. So there are millions and millions of Indian speakers, and they also have their particular accent. And so in the exams now in Cambridge, of course, you will find a mixture of accents. Now, a lot of students overlook that too. They don't prepare. So they've been learning English with a teacher, hearing one accent. They've probably been speaking to their classmates if they're in a group situation. So they're listening to second language speakers speaking English, but they've never really exposed themselves to the variety of accents. And that is also, again, it comes down to preparation, being prepared and making a concerted effort to expose yourself to different genres. In my talk, I'll tell you a little bit more about how we can do that.
I think that's going to be a really interesting aspect of your talk, actually, that how you manage with accents. And what sort of other problems then do learners have with the listening part of exams?
Well, another part, which again is related to genres, is that often in the listening exams, particularly those from Cambridge try to cover a variety of topic areas. And of course, when you're getting to the advanced level, those topic areas are going to be becoming increasingly abstract, because the ability at B2 is your ability to speak about familiar topics and to understand familiar topics. But when you're moving from B2 to C1, C2 into the advanced area, the idea of your competencies is that you can speak with ease about topics that are not familiar to you. Now, in the listening exams, as in the writing exam, in the reading exam particularly, you might suddenly be faced with topics listening about plants or about agriculture, or there might be a listening about science or psychology. And of course, probably, because this is just statistically proven, one of those genres will be something that is of personal interest to you, so that it's an area that you feel familiar with. But you are guaranteed that you're going to be presented with topics in the listening that you have no idea about. Students come out and they say they were talking about cattle herders in Madagascar, or they were talking about the science of tofu, and I don't know anything about that. And again, this is to do with preparation, and it's to do with exposing yourself to genres.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think also one of the problems that you get at advanced level is obviously the topics are more complex, but the listenings themselves are so much longer, aren't they?
And this is an idea as well that I think is a challenge nowadays, because in our society nowadays, people have lost the ability to listen without visual support. Now, I'm a bit older, so when I was younger, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the smartphones, and in our classrooms, we didn't have interactive whiteboards. The teachers used to write with chalk. And even then in my school, I was used to visual support. If somebody was giving a talk, they would write 1 or 2 words on the board, and it would help you concentrate on the thread in a long piece of listening. Nowadays, people, of course, you watch YouTube videos, and of course it's great for your listening, but you're constantly getting visual support. So you're used to being able to not get lost, to not be distracted. Your attention is caught. Of course, many people do listen to podcasts, and that's great, because podcasts does require some kind of intense listening. However, a lot of podcasts out there, we are used to multitasking when we're listening to podcasts. So personally, I put my podcasts on and I'm cleaning the house or I'm cooking. And when we're doing that, we're never really listening with full attention. Now, in the listening exams, of course, that is what is required, because you're going to have questions which are asking about specific details. So it doesn't matter even if you have been listening to lots of podcasts, watching lots of films. Of course, with films, you have lots of visual support too, watching TikTok videos, watching YouTube. Sometimes it's still not enough to prepare you for the listening that you're going to experience in the listening exam. And so
absolutely.
Again, it's a question, I think really what I want to impress upon learners is that listening is not something casual that we just say, oh yeah, you just have to practice. It's not like that. If you're going to go for the listening in advanced exams, you're going to have to do much more than that. It requires more specific preparation.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that.
I will be covering it in the talk. And finally, another aspect that I am covering in the talk, which I haven't mentioned here, is to do with pronunciation. And I didn't mention it, but it's really connected with accents. Again, pronunciation is a little bit of the neglected child in the English learning family. Many learners learn English, but their teachers don't often pay a great deal of attention to pronunciation and producing the variety of sounds that exist in English. Now, I'm not talking about you becoming accent free. This is not the kind of pronunciation I'm talking about. The fact is that there are many sounds in the English language that do not exist in Spanish, that do not exist in French, that do not exist in your languages. If you are not aware of those sounds, you will not hear them. There's also other aspects of pronunciation, like word linking and elision, which for many languages that are phonetically or syllable timed languages, these features do not cause a problem. Spanish is a syllable timed language. Italian is a syllable timed language. The pronunciation is exactly the way you write it. But English is not like that. So there are pronunciation aspects that need to be cared for, especially at advanced levels.
Yes, of course, because when you listen to fast spoken English, the words themselves change sounds, don't they? You know,
they do.
If I said to you, for example, do you know what I mean? You know, the do you know rather than do you know what I mean? I don't even pronounce that T. So it's really important that I think people can build up a mental picture of what that word is, even though it doesn't sound exactly like how it's written.
That's right.
Just one other thing I was going to mention about advanced exams, and this is one of the problems that one of my students was telling me about, It's the fact that when you are listening to the recording and you have the questions, for example, often you're doing more than one thing. You're not just answering a fact-based question, what does this word mean, for example, or what word was meant by this one. So it's a test of synonyms, for example. But you're also asked to do a little bit more processing of the information, to talk about someone's attitude, for example. And this is really quite tough because the questions are quite complex. They're not just a single facet, what does the word mean, but they're also asking about something else as well. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you might get over this problem of not really understanding the question?
Well, this is one of the major areas that I'm going to focus on in the talk as well, because this is about the question types that the examination boards use at advanced level. And you're quite right that during the listening, in actual fact, this test of listening is false. It's not really what we do in life. Because as we're listening, we don't answer questions about the listening. We're engaged with the conversation. Yes. We're engaged with the situation. And in the listening exam, of course, it's false because they have to have a way to assess your listening. They ask you questions. So what happens? You're multitasking. You're reading and listening at the same time. Now, in actual fact, it's impossible to do that. So students, part of preparation is to know what type of question types there are, how to approach those question types, to try to avoid the situation that you're listening and reading at the same time. When you do that, you're going to get the wrong answer.
Yeah,
because it's impossible. So a lot of it to do is to recognize the question type. You'll see, I'll tell you very much about, you've got to focus on what are you listening for. That's the key. And you have to reformulate questions. You have to recognize multiple choice tricks. You have to recognize sentence filling. I'll talk more about that in the talk in detail, but there are question types and it's tricks, techniques that you need so that you can avoid that situation of multitasking.
Thank you so much. I think that is going to be so helpful, as you said, to actually recognize what you're listening for. That's really the key. Thank you so much, Lynne. Absolutely fascinating. I think people are going to find this talk really helpful. So to find out more about how to understand question types, how to understand accents, and how to understand the genres that you might be listening for, make sure that you come to Lynne's talk. Now, Lynne's talk is on Thursday, the 18th of April at 6 p.m. UK time. And a little bit of information about the Advanced English Summit. It's a 3-day online event from the 17th to the 19th of April. And it's especially for you if you are already at an intermediate level, but you want to get further. You want to get to advanced English level. At the summit, there will be 10 talks by English teachers, podcasters, and coaches. And the talks will help you with your English speaking, with your listening, with vocabulary, writing, grammar, and exams. So there's going to be something for everyone. The summit is completely free and all the talks take place on Zoom. So to make sure that you get your place at those talks, make sure that you sign up to join the event. And the sign up is at smartenglishcoach.com/summit. And I'll put that link in the comments for you. Lynne, thank you so much for talking to us today about listening. It was really helpful, especially as you say that listening is often the part of the exam that people feel the most worried about. And I think your advice will really help people to reduce their anxiety, to reduce their stress, and to feel more prepared. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. And looking forward to participating.
Me too. I can't wait for your talk.